And good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming back to our second day of the Kayak Conference, a special conference that's offered for public library staff that work with teens and also with children. We also have some other people coming in to be with us because they get it. They understand how important youth services is. So today, right now in this session, we have Dr. Brittany Worthen, and she's coming to us from Asbury University. She has her doctorate in education from the University of Kentucky, but now is a full-time faculty member at Asbury. So she's also taught in elementary classrooms in both Lexington and Nicholasville, and she lives in Wilmore right now with her whole family and her pup. They also have a production agency called Real Special Productions. So that's a family, organically grown company that specializes in producing videos for all different venues. So she currently is teaching elementary education courses that focus on literacy, and that specifically is why she is here for us. We, as youth services librarians, often are asked to encourage literacy, but we're never really taught how to teach literacy. So Dr. Worthen is here just to share with us and to help us learn different aspects of literacy and how it's taught within the field of education as well. So Brittany, thank you so much for being here with us. We are very appreciative, and I'm going to turn the mic on over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate that warm introduction, and hello to all of you. I wish I could see all of your faces. It seems like I'm talking to just myself, but I know that you're there. So I'm very excited to get to talk with you about this topic today, and please feel free to ask questions and we are going to get going. So my topic for today is using read alouds to teach literacy content. And just like Amy said in my introduction, I do specialize in literacy. So my doctorate is in curriculum and administration with a focus on literacy. So here at Asbury, I teach all of the elementary education reading courses. So basically, I'm teaching future teachers how to teach reading to elementary students. And then I also do courses with literacy assessment. Something that I have become very passionate about in the last few years, we have what's called Story Hour here at Asbury. It's actually happening right now in the room behind me. And so if we have time at the end, I may take my laptop in there and let you see what's going on. But it is a time where we have my students in my elementary ed courses run Story Hour, and they do a time of crafts, books, songs, snacks, and it's an hour that is open to the community for any children to come and do that. And so that's kind of what I am going to talk about, like how can you incorporate some different literacy content when you are using books, whether it's with the clients or patrons that you are interacting with children, even with youth, like Amy was mentioning earlier. So I'm very excited to talk about this today. So I do have something that I really would love is for you to engage with me. So you can chat in the chat box if you'd like. I would just love to know what your experiences are with read alouds, and maybe even talk about what is involved with a read aloud. I'm going to give you about 1 minute to answer that. Amy, help me out. Should I be seeing comments pop up?
I'm not, but if it's
Okay.
easier for you for access to our listeners, if you'd like to take the mic for a second, you're welcome to do that as well. Here we go. Oh, yes, please share in the chat.
Yes,
Tamika.
yes, share in the chat. What are experiences you've had with read alouds, or what is involved with a read aloud?
Is there a specific age level you're looking at? We do quite a bit of read aloud, so it might be people just need a little more narrowing of the question.
Okay, just it's very basic. My question is very basic here. Just wanting to ask, have you read a book out loud to an audience, basically? Okay, so several of you have mentioned in the chat box that you do have experience with read alouds, whether you do that at a library that you're working with or working at, and being able to read out loud. So I just kind of wanted to know what your experience is, but it sounds like a lot of you have been doing it for several years. That's very exciting. Maybe you can teach me a little bit. So think story time, which is kind of what I'm using here as an example, because I wanted it to relate best to your job and how you can influence literacy with those that you're interacting with. So when libraries, which is very evident in what you all have just mentioned with your chat conversation, is that you do host story hours. So some of you have been doing it for a really long time, and probably really enjoy it. So our story hour here at Asbury, it includes we do a couple songs at the beginning. Then the student goes into reading a book. It's usually a theme, so the craft would go with whatever book that the student has chosen to read. And then after the story is over, the student has read the story out loud. We typically have a presentation that's happening in the background. And this year, something we've been doing a little bit different is we've actually been incorporating some literacy content into the presentation. So as the student is reading the book, then they would later ask questions, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So this is an example of story hour, or kind of what I was talking about just a minute ago. So this was actually a couple of weeks ago here down in our library. So this is one of my students, Megan, and she had her presentation set up in the background. We use Canva typically, which is a really great resource for art design and trying to create presentations and posters. This is the activity. So she had like a ladybug theme. So her book was all about ladybugs, and then their craft had to do with ladybugs. And this is a video that actually won't play right now, but this video would show how she's incorporating that and reading with the students that were there. So I want us to talk now about how we can promote or teach literacy through read alouds. Like I've said, a basic read aloud is just reading the story, interacting with students or with children or with youth. If you're doing that with that audience, but not really any type of teaching. And I'm not trying to promote teaching in a read aloud or story time, but I do think there are some different elements that we can include during story time that will help with that literacy aspect. One of the things that I have come across in my research, one of our a well-known researcher way back in the past, Gian Shaw, who was talking a lot about cognitive development and how we develop in our brain. She was actually the one that kind of spearheaded with Sesame Street to incorporate some phonemic awareness interaction in that. So if you've ever seen a Sesame Street episode, you know that they do letter of the day, and they do words that start with the letter, and they talk about the letter, and they incorporate objects in their show that includes the letter. And so that's kind of what I'm going towards in my presentation today, is that you are able to just kind of think outside the box of, okay, I'm going to read this story, but how can I also include some questions or some activities, or just me speaking about the book that would talk about some literacy things without your audience feeling like they're in the middle of a classroom. So one of the things I want to show you, this is a report from the National Reading Panel that was created back in 2000. Lots of different scholars and educated with education experience and background came together, and what they did was they created a big report. It's a very large report, but this report includes the best ways to teach the 5 components of reading. And one of the things that our students and the school system, even elementary, middle, high, no matter what your audience age range is, they are going to be their literacy elements of their classroom, of their instruction, is going to include some, if not all, of what you see here on your screen. So with these scholars, the National Reading Report, this committee got together and talked about phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. Now, we all know comprehension is the reason for reading, right? We want to read for meaning. And so that's something that develops later in elementary school. You start developing it early, but in the very beginning, kindergarten through about 3rd grade, you're really focusing on those foundational skills, which are providing letters, letter sounds, those relationships. You're talking more about, phonological awareness, where if I'm reading a book about a cat, then I may ask my parents, hey guys, can you tell me what word rhymes with cat? And so, your audience may not realize that that's a part of literacy that you're kind of trying to embed and teach with them, but it's fun because it's incorporated into the book that you're reading. So the reason why I have this in front of you is because I just need you, or want to make you aware of, these are the 5 components that are really pushed in the schools, but it's also what I teach here to my college students. Then the next slide goes a little bit deeper. Her last name was Scarborough, and so she created this fancy picture. It's known as a reading group. And so the reason why I have this in here to show you is because I just want you to be able to see kind of the areas where they're really working at in the classroom at their schools. And we could sit here and talk all day about what we feel is not happening in the school, or what, our personal opinions about literacy. But if we get down to it, we know based on testing scores and research that reading is a really big issue in a lot of our schools. And so this is why it's so important to think about the whole picture with reading, and not just saying, here's a book and let's look at some pictures, but you're doing so much more when you're doing that with your audience. You're modeling for them what fluent reading looks like, paying attention to punctuation, taking breaths as you're reading from top to bottom, left to right. All those different parts of a book are very important. And so then the next slide really comes close into talking about this bottom part, where you've got some work with word recognition, phonological awareness, decoding, being able to sound out the word, blend it back together, and then just being familiar with words that we often see in print. So words like thee and said, they, just different basic words that are highly frequented in the books that are read. So I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to progress up into later years in school as well. So this is not just early literacy. I just kind of want you to get a background of this information as to know why it's important, but how you can start incorporating it into working with your patrons, or if you do conduct a story hour, or I know that our library near Asbury's campus does a lot with youth, where they do specific topics, and you can come do some art element with it. And so just trying to think outside the box, how can we also incorporate this literacy aspect into reading with books? Okay, so phonological awareness, there is a website called Reading Rockets, and it is a very great, it's readingrockets.org, and it's a great website that has a lot of information about some of these literacy skills and strategies that I'm talking about. So this is one document in particular that talks about phonological awareness and how to include it in your instruction. So this one is a really great resource. In just a minute, I will look for, or I will put the link to this specific article in the chat box so that you can have that, because it gives some ideas for when you're reading with children or with students. So one of the things that this article talks about is the relationship and the idea of phonological awareness, and to think of it as like a stepping block where you can do some less complex activities with your students. Thank you, Amy. She found it. Great job. Where at the very beginning, you can do some rhyming songs with those that you're a part of. You can have them, like if you were to have a big book in front of them, a very large print book, you could talk about how to break apart sentences into words. You can then even pull out a couple of words from the story that you found, maybe some compound words or other words that are in there that have more than one syllable. And you can say, you know, boys and girls, we have read some really big words in our story today. Let's look at these words a little bit closer. Can you clap with me the syllables in the word watermelon or the word picnic? And so just doing some little activities like that can really go a long way, because research shows when students are spending time, even just a little brief moments a day in this area, it really has an impact in their later reading stages. Like they're going to be better readers later on. So then it goes more into the complex activities where you're having them break apart the word to say the sounds, blending those sounds together to then produce the word, and so forth. So that article goes way in depth into this and may give you a little bit more insight about what that looks like. And then why is phonological awareness important? So again, this is taken straight from that article as well. And it just gives a very brief, very quick glance of research and why this is important. And again, it talks about how if we spend time on this stuff in their earlier years, then that will help them later on to be good readers, you know, when they're in upper elementary, middle, and even high school. So this is one book that I want to share. If I could love a book, any more than this one, it would be hard. This isn't actually, it's a resource book, so it's not like a children's picture book, obviously, that you would read. But I'm going to show you some brief little snippets that are inside this book that are going to be, I think, really helpful for you. It's called The Ramped Up Read Aloud, and it is all about teaching literacy through read alouds. And so thinking about, I don't want you to think about, okay, well, I'm going to have to go back to my specific library and redo all that I'm doing. Again, I'm just trying to give you some ideas of how you could incorporate a little bit more of the literacy components into something that you're already doing. And that's what we actually started doing this year. So before this year, we were not doing any literacy components. We were just doing a basic song, read a story, do a craft, eat a snack, and see you later. But this year, we're actually spending time on, you know, talking about a specific letter that was mentioned a lot. What other words are associated with that letter? You know, thinking about pictures and what words those pictures can go to. So again, something that you're already doing and just incorporating a little bit extra into it. So the Ramped Up Read Aloud is a really great resource. Within the Ramped Up Read Aloud, each chapter goes through several different aspects of what those books in that chapter will help with. And so a lot of them involve comprehension strategies. Several of the chapters in this book talk about fostering a growth mindset. So just being able to pay attention to what's happening in the story, looking at the words and the pictures in a book to just recognize what's going on around you. And then we also have some aspects that talk about developing students' social and emotional learning. That's where you're joining in with the person that's reading, joining in with each other, you're listening. That's a huge important literacy skill. You know, when I first started thinking about literacy, or even when I was first a teacher, when I think literacy, I strictly think reading, but it also incorporates listening and writing and so many aspects that are all just weave together. And so listening is a huge part. So making sure that you're modeling good reading is a really beneficial part of all of this. If you're reading a story and you're reading like a robot, or you're reading super fast, you're not taking time to really slow down and engage students into the reading, that could possibly not benefit them because you're not being a good model of that. So I think that's something that's really important. Again, singing songs get students engaged. Now, I don't know that singing songs for middle school and high school students would be super effective, but there may be something out there that you could incorporate that would go along with what you're reading. Maybe some music that hits home to the theme or the content that the book has. And then there's some different literacy language. So, thinking about ways that you can incorporate that into your lessons and teaching. So here is an example. It just talks about adjectives that you could talk about. Adjectives are describing words. What are some words that you could describe this character Molly in the book that we just read? Using expressive words, words that can describe again, and words that help show action, sounds, bringing forth emotion, interjection words, nursery rhymes, onomatopoeia. I was just talking to some of my students out in the library about this word a minute ago. Rhyming words, all of those are really important things. Again, you're already reading the book, but just simple things that you can already include. So this is an example of one of the lessons that's inside that Ramped Up Read Aloud book that I showed you just a second. And Amy has actually posted a comment about where you can get that book. So thank you again for doing that. In one of the examples, this is from a chapter in the book that's working on early foundational skills. And so a book that is recommended is called May I Have a Word? So that's the actual children's picture book that you would read. And then the lesson, the book, for each chapter, it gives specific lessons, and it talks about the book that it goes with. It even gives you learning targets, so things that you can strive for as you're reading that book with your audience. It talks about what conversations that you could have. So, comprehension is a huge deal, right? It's very, very important that when we're reading, students are paying attention, they're listening. That language development is really, really important. Just having conversations, even, and I'm going off topic a little bit here, I tend to do that. So pardon me for this, but even when you're having conversations with the patrons and your audience, that is crucial. Just having those conversations, even if it's about a book. If a middle school or high school student comes in and they are looking for the sequel to a book that they've already read, and then maybe talking with that person about the book that they just read and why do they want to read the sequel and what interests them about that. That conversation is crucial to developing language comprehension, because, students, children, even adults need to be able to understand what's being spoken to them. So going back to comprehension from this specific lesson, it gives you some different ideas that you can do before you start reading the book, when you're reading the book, and even it gives you some things for after the book, like it gives you some extensions. So in this example, it talks about C words and K words and shows you pictures that go along with that specific letter and letter sound. So again, just doing something simple and easy. I'm not sure your resources, like for example, we have an old Mondo pad. So a lot of the schools now are using smart boards, or I just totally forgot. We actually just got these up in our School of Ed department, but it's a newer technology board that you can navigate just by touch. So I'm not sure if you have something like that you could use, where you could have students drag the picture and what letter sound does it go to. But little things like that are really important. Next slide is going to give you another example. So this one is using the book, The Bug Zoo. And again, it gives you a short summary about the book, and then it gives you some different ideas that you can do before you read the book, while you're reading the book, and then after you read the book. So it kind of extends the experience that you have with your audience, and being able to incorporate them and engage them in that. So that might even actually be the craft or the activity that you're doing to follow up with the book. But just thinking about, you could, the book that you're reading out loud to your audience, or if it's one-on-one setting, maybe go back through the book before you have that time with your audience and make post-it notes throughout the book and ask, put some of these questions, or think of questions yourself that you can ask as you're reading the story. Again, that's going to give your audience a purpose. They are listening to be able to comprehend. So you may even say at the very beginning, hey guys, I'm going to give you, we're going to be reading this story, and I'm going to stop along the way and ask you some questions. So make sure that you are really paying attention and think about what the character is doing throughout this whole story. Or maybe even talk about, let's talk about, or think, as I'm reading, I want you to think about this character and, Lily's purple plastic purse. We're going to talk about Lily at the end of the story. I want you to tell me what kind of character she is. Like, how does she act, and what do you think about that? And so when you're done with the story, instead of just dismissing them to a new song or a different craft, you can actually have conversation with each other about, hey, what was Lily like? How was her attitude when she interacted with her teacher? Why was she so upset? Like, what happened about that? Would you be upset if that ever happened to you? And so just asking them even things that would bring in their background knowledge, having that personal connection will really help them to understand the text a lot more. So in this example, with the book that we were just talking about here, with Bug Zoo, an extension that they have is they had an actual chart that you could use, which you see here in the picture. And one great thing about this book, it's a companion website that you can go to. So they've created a website where it lists several different resources that you can print off and use. So if you wanted to use that with your audience, that would be really helpful. It's already created for you. Maybe that's something that you want to do at the beginning of your craft time. Something else that's important to note is that they have, maybe to hook your audience, they have on some of the books that are listed throughout the Ramped Up Read Aloud, they have about a 2 to 3 minute little hook or a little introduction of what the book is about. It's kind of like a really quick summary. So that might engage your patrons. Hey guys, we're going to be reading this book today, but let's first watch this video to see what it's going to be about. And then you can go into the book. So this one has, again, it talks about a connection to the book that you all just read, thinking about another person, and then also talking about some different adjectives that may describe the character that was in that story. So here, thinking about going back to the National Reading Panel and thinking about those essential components of reading, we go back to fluency and comprehension. That's so important. Again, modeling and asking questions as you're reading the story. This one's a little bit different. This is talking about learning from character. So the ones that I just showed you, the two examples previously, those are more focused on those early foundational skills. But throughout the Ramped Up Read Aloud, there are several different topics it incorporates. It talks about problem and solution, talking about characters. And this one is specifically about a character overcoming a fear. And so Jabari Jumps is a well-known book. And you can see right here, it talks about the companion website that you can access by along with this book. But again, it talks about to really open up discussion and talk to your audience about things, maybe just to ask some questions about, okay, let's look at this story. What do you see on the front cover? Yeah, you see a little boy that's about to jump off something. What do you think he's about to jump off of? How do you think he feels? How would you feel if you were about to jump off a high diving board? I remember when I was a little girl, our neighborhood pool, they had a low diving board, a middle height diving board, and a really high diving board. And I was always so scared to jump off the high diving board because it was just so high and the water looked so far away. So little things like that to just bring in those personal connections. Research also says that bringing in background knowledge, which is a fancy word for that is called schema, which is a lot to do with the Kentucky academic standards. So the standards that our elementary, middle, and high school teachers are teaching out in the school system are incorporating schema. So making connections to books that you're reading, even trying to help your patrons when they come in. And I know that typically libraries don't keep a record of the books that have been checked out, but it may be possible to where you could go to a patron and say, hey, what books have you been reading about? Hey, let's go find some books that would connect to some other books that would help you think about, these two books would relate to one another and help you remember the book that you read previously. So there's some things like that you can do as well. Again, comprehension conversation just asks you or gives you some things that you can do before you read, while you're reading, and after reading too. And then this one in particular is extending experience. Again, another activity that you could do. So it talks about what lesson can you learn, divide a paper in half. On one side, you can draw a picture from the book and write what you learned. And then you can start with the words, from Jabari, I learned. And then on the other side, the audience could draw a picture of themselves in a situation that makes them feel scared. So again, you're connecting. It's kind of like a craft, but it is an extension to the book that you read. Here is another story. This is called Embrace Unexpected Endings. This is not, that book is called A Hungry Lion, but the topic or the theme for this book is all to do with embrace unexpected endings. So again, just looking at some different ideas for comprehension, things that you can do before, during, and after reading, maybe even modeling your thinking out loud. So that's one really great way to help model for your patrons, is as you're reading the story, to actually say out loud what you're thinking about when you're reading. That's called metacognition, right? When you're thinking about what you're thinking about as you're reading. And then to be able to model that out loud is really helpful for students. This is an activity. Again, if you go to the companion website, it includes these resources that you can print off for free and use. And so this is just an activity, again, that was related to the story. There's a bigger view of it. So again, you're writing the title, the author of the story, you're rating the picture, you're rating the book, and then drawing a picture of your favorite part. So sometimes I don't feel like our students get enough time to be creative in the public schools. And so this may give them that opportunity to be a little extra creative above and beyond the book or the craft or the activity that you're doing with them. This one is really fun. So this one is all about manipulating letters to make words. So here is a children's picture book all about Lexi, the word wrangler. And I love this one because it provides for you, again, with the companion website, it provides for you a graphic organizer that you can use where your audience could try to come up with some 2-letter words, 3-letter words, and so on. You could even do this whole group, with all of your audience. You could do it together instead of doing it individually. And then here's another resource from the companion website that you could use. And then again, another great article from readingrockets.org. This is talking about using repeated interactive read alouds for younger students, or younger audience. But again, just making those read alouds interactive is super, super beneficial. Not just sitting up there reading a story and then going to the next thing, but actually interacting with the story that you're using. Text Talks is another great idea here, where you're actually talking about the text that you're reading. So that's kind of what we've been talking about this whole presentation so far. But this Amy, I don't know if you have the website that you can link in here as well, but this is a document that lists hundreds of different text talks that you can incorporate into what you're already doing. So it gives you ideas that you can use, books that you can use. It's already there for you. The work is already done. You just, think about how you want to use that within your own library. text talking, we don't do that enough, and I really love it. Maybe you do. I shouldn't say we don't do that enough, but I know growing up and even with my former elementary teaching experience, that was just not something that we would do a lot. So thinking about going back to our beginning question, how can we incorporate literacy content in children's literature? Well, we've talked about several different ways. We can, incorporate some of those components of reading into the stories that we're already doing. We can ask students more questions or ask your audience more questions to get them more involved and engaged into what you're reading. We can model for them all the different types of things that we're thinking, things that we're connecting with, or, asking different types of questions. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. This is my email address if you want to contact me for anything, or I can send you this presentation where you can have the embedded links into it. And I would love some time. I don't know, Amy, if we have any time for questions or anything like that, but that would be something that I would love to talk to you all about before you guys have to go to your next thing. So again, thank you.
Yeah, we still have about 5-ish more minutes, give or take, and well, really give. So if you have questions here for Brittany, you can feel free to put them in the text chat, or if you prefer, you're welcome to steal the mic. Either way is just fine.
I'm going to find that one link for you all for the text talks. I have it right here. So I'm going to put it in the chat box so that you can have that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure which one you wanted of the text talks on that one.
Yeah, and this is actually, it was created from the state of from educators in the state of Utah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not anything that I put together, but there you go. That is the link that will take you to all of those different text talks. And it just talks about, it gives you all the different books. And it gives you some words that you can incorporate with them, words that you can talk about, and then it goes through and it gives you specific, like, here, go to this page and ask this question, or go to this page and show this illustration. So it's a really great resource.
Yeah, Colorado's been really vested in this. They have an early literacy conference that's done annually. And I suspect that's where that all bubbled up from, the link you put in.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Miss Fields. That means so much.
Yeah, and if you guys have questions other times too, Brittany is very responsive, and I hope I'm not being too presumptuous, but
no, you're fine.
I figured she'd say,
please. Someone asking.
So, and if this is something too that you would enjoy an even bigger deep dive into, please let me know and we'll see what we could do. So font. Yes, it is a neat font. I wondered that too. Well, Brittany, thank you so much. What a gift you've given us, and we now have more information in our arsenal to deal with and to challenge ourselves and to integrate or to think about ourselves. And it's also good material to share with parents, because parents like to know also that they're making good choices and doing things that are positive for their parents. So
I do, let me mention, I didn't forget, I just did not put this in the slide, but it made me think of it. So some of you who are, have more of the middle or high school audience, there is, and it could also be for elementary, but there's another book called The Rebellious Read-Alouds, and it's inviting conversations about diversity with children. So that might be something like another book that you want to research a little bit. Just diversity is such a huge topic right now in schools, in our world. And so that might be another book that you want to look at. It's called Rebellious Read-Alouds.
And I'll put that on the list for getting to. We don't have it in the library. So thank you for the recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll throw that into our list as well. Not everything gets flagged to us when it comes up the education track. So definitely, we very much appreciate recommendations too. So thank you.
Yeah, there's one question from Miss Fields about resources for middle schoolers. So what I'm seeing, I've given several professional developments on somewhat on this topic, but more about helping, our middle and high school students how to read. I would say your resources are what I presented today. You've got audiences that are on completely different levels, and going back to those components of reading, those are still things that they're doing in middle and high school. Probably not the phonemic awareness, phonological awareness stuff, but vocabulary, fluency, comprehension, all of that is crucial to middle and high school students as well. So.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah. And just throw a shout out also to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences for allowing us to, well, not funding us and supporting us to be able to do this conference in general, and also specifically to be able to host Brittany here. Just thank you, Brittany, for coming and sharing with us. You've given us just gifts. So thank you for your time and work and effort. And we hope you have a good day after this.
Thank you so much. I'm actually headed out to our story hour. The kids are painting pumpkins right now. So thank you all.
I'm sure many of us can empathize with that. So thank you everybody for being here.
Well,
yes, of course.
I have one question. Thank you, Brittany, for answering my question. It's just I tend to have a hard time getting my middle schoolers who are going to become high schoolers reading. And I know that I can get the younger kids, but how can I get the older kids? I guess that's my issue.
Yeah, it really it stems from their interest level. So I think that's one thing that you have to gauge. I'm sure you already do that and already know that. But I sometimes I just feel like they don't know where to look. And showing them different genres of books. So, thinking about modern fantasy or science fiction, like all of these different historical fiction, all these different types of genres and books that they can look at. I just sometimes, even me myself, I'm thinking, okay, well, what's new? What's out there? Just being able to show them resources, making lists of different types of genres and books. Doing like a themed night where you have your middle and high schoolers coming and it's centered around this one book, but the activities or the conversation that you have is about the book. For me personally, this may seem a little silly, but I love reading books that have turned into movies. And so maybe connecting like a book and a movie night, or connecting your middle and high schoolers to really doing like a book club, or even reading books that are then movies and comparing and contrasting. Did the movie, was it different from how the author wrote the book? And just little things like that I think would be helpful too.
Other questions?
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Other questions, anyone? We still have her. All right, Brittany, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Please enjoy the rest of your day. And
thank you. Same to you all.
All right. And
Bye-bye.
for in the conference, we'll